Hey everyone, welcome back to The Current, Real Talk on Real Topics. My name is Bo. This is Curtis. Bringing you another great episode,
That's right.
Faith and Science, Part 1.
Mm.
So we're going to spend 3 weeks here talking about faith and science, and here's kind of the roadmap. This week we're going to talk about creation. Next week we're going to talk about evolution, and then the third week we're going to talk about medicine. So, yeah, it'll be fun, and I'm excited about this one. The thing and why I think it's important to share why we want to do this topic, because we're always trying to come up with ideas that I think people can relate to, especially people that are in faith or maybe even faith seekers, or maybe some tensions that arise within the realm of Christianity. And this definitely is one because, I don't know, I mean, especially just how I grew up, you know, faith and science, we're not allowed to coexist.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a good
And
way
I
to
think
put
there's a tension there. I think a lot of people think that faith and science don't go together, and they can't go together. You know, if you have faith, then trusting science is not possible. If you trust science, you can't have faith. That dilemma. So did you grow up in that kind of world, or like
Oh, definitely.
maybe even Bible college, kind of that stuff?
Exactly. Yeah. This has been something where you hit a certain space where, yeah, your views evolve on this. You change. You see how maybe they can coexist a bit better, and something we're going to get to talk about. But absolutely, yeah, growing up, it was sort of seen as, two competing options where you can take one or you can take the other. I think this will really come out when we talk about evolution, but it sort of seems like, hey, science presents us one answer, faith presents us another answer, and these two things aren't seeing eye to eye. Even to the point where I can think of seeing this come out in some of my classes in Bible college. I can remember a student raising their hand and saying, hey, I have this friend who's working through and kind of thinking about theistic evolution. And the professor was shutting that down, was not having it. It was like, oh, we need to be praying for that student. He's going to, and any sort of ceding some ground of faith, to science was seen as like, oh, a slippery slope into atheism, First it's evolution, next it's, there is no God.
Yeah,
So.
and even being at Rhythm Church the last decade, there have been people that have left our church because of our specific stance on this topic, which that leads me to just the first thing I would say. We say this all the time on this podcast, but this is not an issue to fight over. It's really not. This is not a make it or break it type of issue. This is a secondary issue. We say, keep the main thing, which is Jesus. We focus on him. But your view of faith and science should not really determine whether you're plugged into a local body. I mean, Christians have disagreed on this forever, and they will continue. That doesn't mean you can't associate yourself with a particular local church context. Now, if you see this as a major issue, I would encourage you to just do some examining. Again, we've had people leave our church because of our stance on faith and science, or specifically in that what we're talking about today. The specific instance I'm remembering is the previous pastor here taught on creation, his view of the creation account, which is the topic of our episode today, talking about creation, and left because of his view. And again, like, this is a secondary issue. So if you hear us talk about it, obviously we're going to talk about kind of in depth today, but just know that like we are open-handed with this. It's not something we're going to fight you over. Although we do think there's some like logical reasons these can exist together. I think that's kind of probably our big message of the entire series will be, hey, like faith and science can coexist, and depending on where you land on the spectrum is another issue. But.
For sure. And I think this is something you're going to hear us return to again and again, is to say ultimately for a lot of these discussions, I find myself ending in a place of what difference does it make, or what does it matter? In the sense of I can think of issues that maybe warrant splitting over and even have some really serious, maybe impassioned conversations. The age of the earth is just not one I've ever understood. If you're going to peace out because someone thinks the earth's a little bit older or a little bit younger than you, I just don't see why it's a cause for so much division and a lot of heat, a lot of passion.
Yeah. amongst Christians. It doesn't make sense to me either. But again, I know people get really passionate about certain things and whatever. But so let's talk about creation. Let's dive into this one. Like I said, this week creation, next Friday evolution.
Evolution, yeah.
Following Friday will be medicine. So creation. Let's just start by saying we're going to specifically talk about creation as in we specifically will say that we live in a created world, that there was a divine creator. There was nothing, and then there was something. I think that's an important kind of distinction to make, that we literally believe that there was nothing and then there was something. At the beginning of life began because a God created. So when we mention creation, that's just the reference point. That's the starting point. So, and then we'll talk about what that specifically looks like, because that's where the start of the debate kind of starts amongst Christians is, okay, yeah, we believe that there was a creator, but then what does that look like? Whereas some people, you might be listening and you don't believe in creation at all or whatever. Like there's not a divine, just kind of boom, big bang type, just specific, just straight science. Cool. But we're specifically going to talk about the creation account.
Yeah.
So generally two camps.
Yes.
So talking about creation, generally two camps. There is young earth and old earth. Let's talk about both of these for a second, and then we'll dive into kind of what we think. But young earth, meaning the earth is only
7,000
7,000 something years old. God created it with the appearance of age.
That's important, yeah.
What else am I missing there?
Yeah, I think when speaking about young earth, it's really going to end up becoming an issue of what do we do with this book of Genesis 1? How do we understand it? But the young earth camp's going to come from kind of a more literal reading of that text and want to say, hey, what we're getting here is, maybe not necessarily a video camera showing us how it unfolds, but a rather detailed and specific account, and that these words are inspired. And so we're getting a picture of what literally transpired. So because of that, the
like
young
actual days,
exactly
like on the first
these
day,
6
on the second,
literal 24-hour periods is when this creation takes place. The creation of Adam and Eve being very little, all these sort of things, leading them to believe just in a young earth that has the appearance of age, even though itself is not that old. And I think that's, kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah. And then, so there's old earth, which, and again, this series is called Faith and Science. So I would just say, like, young earth tends to lead more towards the faith side. Like, that's their emphasis. And then there's old earth, who tends to lean more towards the science side, where they look at like carbon dating, actual science research that's done on age and like being able to determine what the age of things are. And they would say that the earth is millions of years old.
Yes.
Just based on carbon dating and science, it's very, very old.
Yes.
Now, Christians, again, you look back at the creation account, talk about specifically Genesis. Old earth Christians hold that a little bit loosely, not as literal reading of Genesis.
Yeah.
One day might have been a really long time. And they get that because of other places in Scripture where it says like one day is like thousands of years to God.
Peter,
outside of time. So it's not that they're not being like just doing away with the Bible completely. It's just their translation, their reading of Genesis is much looser than young earth. And so they believe that the earth really is millions of years old. It has existed for this long. God created it still, but it's been around for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So, and it actually is old.
Right.
It is the age that science says it is.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's, a good way to sort of frame and lay it out is to say, it becomes a discussion between, just sort of a flat reading of this Genesis or a plain reading of this Genesis document seems to say that, the earth was made in this many days and based on this many generations of people we have in the Bible who lived this many years long, we can come to arrive at the age of the earth. Science arriving at a different one, and us saying, okay, who's right? Are they both? How do we integrate? Where do we land here? Maybe a good spot to just start before we peel back a little bit of why we end up where we are. It would be just to ask, where do you find yourself sitting in this spectrum or along this debate? What's your take on the young Earth, old Earth?
Myself?
Yes, personally.
Okay. Personally, I lean towards old Earth. I love science. I'm a big believer in science, but my view of Scripture, specifically Genesis, specifically the Old Testament, I don't tend to read it very literally. So
Sure.
That's kind of where I land.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any problem saying that, one day isn't necessarily one day.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just as another example in the Old Testament, Jonah getting swallowed by a whale. Could it have happened? Sure. But does it have to happen to get the point across?
Right.
I tend to just read Genesis a lot, not in such a literal,
yeah.
or the Old Testament in such a literal way. And the same thing is true in Genesis, the creation account. Pretty much all the Old Testament, kind of not a true just literalist there. So.
Yeah, I think that's really a great place to start because I'm in the same camp. If someone is saying how old's the Earth, first I'd say I don't think it matters. Is where I start. But if you really want my opinion, you want my take on it, I would say yes, the Earth is old, much older than 7,000 years, and for a few reasons we'll get into some of those. But yeah, I think a great place to start is just how we handle the text of Genesis, because I think we run into, as we said before, people who arrive at an opinion of a young Earth tend to do so because they take a very literal reading of this document. And so I think we need to be good Bible readers. Mm-hmm. We want to say that the Bible is important. It's trying to communicate something to us. But part of that good Bible reading is understanding, okay, what are the genres of the books we're reading? Right. What's going on here? When I look at Genesis, I don't think what the author is intending to do or what we're supposed to intend to receive from this is a
textbook.
Yeah, or like a video recording of exactly what went down. I don't think the author of this document is saying, let me peel back the curtain and give you an exact picture of what transpired. I don't think that's the genre of this. I think we see Genesis 1 as sort of this ancient Near Eastern creation myth, and it shares a lot in common with other local ancient Near Eastern Christian myths as well.
Sure. And you have to understand, too, just real quick on just piggyback on that point. The printing press that's the modern technology. This idea of stuff being recorded as like exactly how it's written is fairly new to humankind. I mean, you gotta understand, like, this creation account would have been shared orally for thousands of years. I mean, literally, like, they're just sharing like a story, So it's again, we believe the Bible is true. We believe things in the Scriptures are amazing and useful and helpful. But you're right. There are literary genres, and to think that Genesis is, again, like a video recording of what exactly happened is, in my opinion, not doing the text justice or what its intention was, not understanding the literary genre.
Yes. I think we really need to understand when we're reading the Bible, and as we understand how the Bible came to be, it wasn't, I don't think, as if God was lobotomizing these individuals and just kind of dumping direct stream of like truth or words into their head. I think God works with the people where they're at. He lets his kids tell the story, so to speak. Yeah. And so we're going to get a perspective that is very pre-modern and ancient here. Again, that doesn't mean untrue. Again, I don't think the author is intending to give us a history lesson here, like I said, as a video recording. The author's trying to make certain points about what creation is, how it came to be, how to understand God in relation to that. Yep. But I don't think the point of it is to say, here's exactly how the earth unfolded, here's exactly how long it took, here's exactly how old these people were. I think we're just coming to the text with questions that it's not intending to answer for us. And I think that's just the first thing to understand when we're really trying to wrestle with this.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously, like, I grew up in an environment in which I was taught that every word of the Scriptures is exactly how it's It's very literal. It's so literal. You know, like Jonah got swallowed by a whale. Jonah got swallowed by a whale. He was in there for 3 days. Like, that for sure happened. My question is, how do you like whatever? Like, there's a lot of science questions based on that. Like,
yeah, there is questions
it's
like
just
that.
like, you know, but again, like that's just what I was. That's how I was raised. It's like what I was taught to believe.
Yeah.
You know, but then once you're exposed to other ideas, you really start thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
And again, my view of how I view Scripture has changed drastically. And it's not because I'm trying to, like you said, like it's not because I don't think the Bible's true, or it's not because I don't think it's important, or I just dismiss the Scriptures and think, oh, like they're no big deal. I believe whatever I want. That's not it at all. It's just I'm trying to be the best Bible reader I possibly can be, and understanding different genres, different purposes behind the text, I think is a big part of why my view has changed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, like Psalm, like what is the book of Psalms? Like it's a specific type of genre. Like there's other genres within the Bible. It's not just this flat, plain text. It's all on equal playing field. It's all, there's different heart and intentions behind each book. So
yeah, and then we need to understand. Yeah, so the way that I open up and read the book of Genesis is gonna be very different than the way I approach and I read, say, the book of Mark. You know, I do think again where the gospel writers, the evangelists, aren't trying to give us literal video recordings there either.
No.
But I think the gospel accounts.
There's a lot of his life missing if that's the case.
True. Yeah. You know, I think they are doing ancient history and history telling, gospel kind of being its own genre. So I think we're getting a closer reproduction of history when we're looking at the gospel accounts because it's a different genre intending to do some of those things. So again, just the first place to start is to say I think we get off on the wrong foot and we come to some wrong answers because we start off with the wrong sorts of reading.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very good. And so the counter argument to this, the flip side, is, again, if you have a more literal take of the Genesis account, God created one day, one day, one day, one day.
Yeah.
Well, then what do you do with, like we talked about before, the tension between, okay, now science is saying that doesn't match what the Scriptures say. So, and that is when people come in and say, well, to reconcile this, to make it compatible, God had to have created it old, which I get. Like, I understand that. I just don't believe it. You know, like I get how people come to that conclusion. I get why they come to that conclusion. Honestly, like I don't have a big issue with it. Like I don't really care. That's totally cool. Like if you're in that camp, I would say I disagree with you, but that's awesome. I get why. I totally do. You know, because it makes it fit. Like it starts giving you some answers to. I'm just such a big believer in science. Like I love science. Like I think it's awesome. But like I get it. I totally get why you and that's what's cool thing is like. I like that camp too because to me it just shows like the power of God, like His ability to kind of do just this beautiful out of nothing, like the Grand Canyon. I think it's like a, you know, Prudence and I were talking about this the other day. Like when she went to the Grand Canyon, she said it was like a. I don't remember what she's in the room. I should just ask her, but she's like, it was just like incredible experience, just totally overwhelming. I mean, she's sitting there and it's just like just taken back by just
taking
what
in this scene.
And I felt the same way. Like when I was, I was just like, this feels fake. You know, like, it's like this can't be real. But I think about, you know, like a young Earth person, you know, just saying, hey, like God made it that way, which is fine. Now I think it happened naturally over time, you know, because of the whatever. That's what I believe, but. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You know?
Here's what I'll say. I do understand if you are coming and saying, hey, this particular sort of reading of Genesis 1 needs to be true. And if this is my stand of saying, like, this is the truth, and so anything else around it needs to be shifted to fit this particular picture. I mean, I understand. I understand the desire behind it. For me, I feel no need to, commit myself to an understanding of the earth being young when I feel like this document's not intending to do that or give me that sort of a picture. But I think even if we take a more literalist approach, even if we try to do it, we find ourselves with some issues. Like even far from being modern thinkers, like even pre-modern, some of the patristic stuff, you'll have commentators saying, okay, clearly this isn't intending to tell us how old the earth really is. We have days happening before the sun and moon have been created. Like, how do we understand day cycles going on with that? People who will talk about, you know, Aquinas says, and, you know, as Christians, we should be willing to reinterpret text in light of the understandings and findings of science, because
Yeah.
if we don't, then we're going to end up looking foolish, he says. Aquinas is perfectly happy, and I think Catholics are a bit ahead of this, to embrace some natural theology and the sciences and say, this is another valid means of coming to arrive at truth alongside, our reading of Scripture, and that these both are avenues to understanding truth in different ways. But John Calvin's another great one. He says, you want to know about the age of the earth and all that, kind of the stars and that, go ask the astronomer. Like, that's where you go, okay? The text isn't really looking to do that. And I think this is also where we can enter in a concept that Calvin and other theologians talk about called divine accommodation. And that is that, again, God doesn't lobotomize people. Obviously, humans are in a context where, at one point, if you would have told them the world is round, it's going to blow their heads off. Like whoa, God works with the people as they are. He's going to communicate to them in ways that they can understand. He's going to adopt some of their framework and mindset for the sake of communication. So I'm not surprised at all to find Scripture, some of the Psalms, embracing the language, the worldview of the pre-modern. The Psalms will talk about the earth sitting on pillars with a firmament above and water below. And this is a very natural pre-modern cosmology and understanding of the world. But I want to ask the young earth creationist, do you think the earth sits on pillars and has like this firmament holding back water from above the sky?
Yeah, I mean, if your God is big enough to create the world old, can he not be big enough to use science to,
Yeah. And science at the end of the day is just a means at arriving at knowledge, saying, hey, we can use the empirical method and we can use the data we're having come in and recreate these experiments to arrive at some means of truth. And I think that's good. I think maybe I'd like to respond to just a couple other things that we'll sometimes see in the young earth camp. You brought up this idea of the appearance of age, and this has been interesting to me. Someone said this to me one time. I'm not signing my name on it just yet, but it was an interesting thought. He talked about an issue with some of the appearance of the age. We'll say, well, it looks like it's old. And he'd say, well, is God a deceiver? Is God ever deceptive? And he says it's not just the appearance of age, but the appearance of the appearance of a story, the appearance of history, right? When we're aging some of the earth, we're looking at some stuff like craters on the moon, impact, this different stuff. It would be as if Adam wasn't just appeared old, like, in his 30s or whatever prime humanity is, but he had scars and a story and all these sort of things. Is God deceptive in that way? I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
That when we're looking at the science, we're looking at the earth around us, it begins to tell a story. It seems to have the appearance of not just age, but history. Which I thought was just an interesting take.
That is. I like that.
Yeah, something to chew on.
That's good. Yeah, I love the topic, and again, we're gonna kind of expand on the creation account and then talk about evolution, which is another just big controversial topic in the Christian world, and so that'll be exciting. So thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you got a lot out of that. I know it was a lot of just kind of a very meaty episode, but if you need to run it back, let's do it again.
It sounds great.
But as always, chime in, let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to have a conversation, or if you want more information or maybe some reading, some just kind of research on both sides, we'd be happy to help you out with that. So thanks again for joining with us here on The Current. We'll see you next Friday. Grace and peace.